Hello! Excuse the bad hair. It's an off week for me, but it's time for this Subversion Live after show where we recap everything Subversion Live Season 2. I'm CLC and I'm joined by two amazing guests who have played our series either online or maybe last season to talk about everything Episode 4. Before I bring them on, if you've not watched the fourth episode, you should go watch the episode on YouTube at Subversion Mall before you come and engage in the discussion. It's not going to make a lick of sense unless you go do that. On our YouTube page also has a link to our Discord where most of our communication and our discussion happens live. So if you want to engage in that discussion, join our Discord. Alrighty, I'm joined by two guests. I'll bring on the one who's played more recently. You know him from Subversion Live Season 1. It's Gavin.
Woo!
Woo!
Yes.
Sorry.
I didn't know what to say. So
Woo.
Just woo.
Well, hopefully our next guest has something prepared from online Season 2 and online All-Stars. It's Geneva.
I don't have anything prepared, TLC, but happy to be here. It's crazy. Kind of being, and we've been playing a lot of different interesting things behind the scenes in this sort of subversion world, like trailers stuff. So that's all fun. But excited to be here to talk about Subversion once again. I was also on a recap for season 1.
She was. I don't remember if you were right or wrong. When I forget how early or late you were on in the season. Obviously, if you're earlier on, it's a lot harder to be right.
I don't know. I don't think I was on at the very end, but I think it was still kind of probably confusing. I think I was probably wrong. I'm assuming, but I could have been potentially right. Don't even remember.
Well, let's just assume Geneva was dead on the money. So she's about to be dead on the money here in 45 minutes when I ask her who the mole is. So you heard it here first. Don't go back and fact check me on season 1. Don't do that.
Please don't. I don't want to.
Don't do that. But before we get into the episode itself, any general thoughts on the cast? Anyone you've got your eye on coming into episode 4? So anything from the first 3 episodes or just anything you know about these people in general that you want to highlight before we hop in?
So I can go first. I think this cast is pretty fun. I feel like this episode, we're starting to see people get more comfortable around each other in terms of feeling, more willing to do things maybe they should or shouldn't do, whether it's intentional or not. I feel like, I don't know, Carson gives off serious mole decoy right now. I just feel like whether he's intentionally sabotaging things or not, I think people are noticing, and that's becoming very prevalent. And then you're seeing other people notice subtle things, Sarah noticing, Nathan doing certain things, and then people noticing Madeline doing certain things. So I think it's just cool now to be able to kind of, as I'm starting to get to know everybody better and their game styles, just kind of looking for certain patterns or clues, and even the whole Kim situation in, one of the challenges as well. So.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And I agree with all the names that you kind of put out there. Those were people that I think have kind of consistently been catching a little bit of flack for their performance in some of the missions. And I think that some of those people as well, I've noticed in the parts at the start of the episode, sort of recapping their thoughts on the quiz, that some of those folks have been like, oh, well, the people who went home were kind of towards the top of my list of suspicions. And I think eventually, especially as we're kind of getting closer to the middle phase of the game, you have to start, as viewers, we're going to have to start looking a little bit more closely at the people who are consistently having their top suspects going, but yet they continue to stay. Yeah.
That's a great segue because it's the next thing on my agenda. So we start every episode assuming there was an execution in the last episode about people talking about the last execution and where they're at right now. And you've got a few people who are like, I didn't really suspect Shilpa, like that's fine. But you got a lot of people being like, Shilpa was my number one, or she was someone I was looking at, and I was also looking at Ben C, and I was looking at Mark. Like, how authentic do you think those thoughts are? But also, like, do you have any personal experience or any advice for like kind of like people who are in this mentality of like, if they're being honest, like, oh shit, you've lost 3 suspects in a row, like kind of how do you change course? Because you both have played mole games. Like, how do you kind of like change your course knowing that your top suspect is gone?
Yeah, I feel like if they're being honest, then I think it tells you maybe that you need to kind of just rethink about how you're thinking about this game, because if it's that everyone either you were close to or people that you thought were clear suspects were literally like you actually did your quiz and you actually put a bunch of questions towards them, then I think that's kind of the point where it's like maybe you just start looking for other things that you're not actually looking for, because maybe the things that stood out to you about those previous people who went home were kind of incorrect. So I think that's probably very important there. But then I also do question some of the people who are saying, oh, I was suspect of this person and then they went home. Well, I guess my question is, maybe are you the mole? Because you're just saying that, right? Because you're not necessarily actually suspect of anyone specifically. So you're just saying something. So I think it's very interesting to kind of see, because, I've seen some of the previous after shows, and there's kind of that sort of talk where people were saying like these are who they were suspect of, but they weren't actually going into the quiz, maybe voting it that way. So it's kind of hard to say in some ways really what people are doing, but I think those are some of the indicators that I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I know that one of the main people that I sort of had jotted down that said it in the beginning of this episode was Ty, who said like, oh, like my top two suspects went home during the double execution, and then he said, then Shilpa was one of my top suspects, and then she went home. So then it's just kind of at a certain point, I literally just wrote down need to track, because it's something. It's if that's a common theme, then I think that Ty for me will have growing suspicion as someone who could be a mole candidate. But I was also really interested because Sam had mentioned or said something along the lines of like, the mole must fucking hate me. Like all my allies are getting eliminated.
Yep.
And then it's a similar thought process though, where even though she's not maybe explicitly naming the people that are getting executed, if she's feeling like she's aligned with those folks, and if there is some semblance of information sharing going on, then at a certain point she will also have to come under scrutiny as well.
Yeah. And I think that was one thing that was interesting, where I was wondering, yeah, I understand that for Sam, those are her closest allies, but were they talking a lot before the quiz? Were they saying that they were putting down the same people?
Good point.
Was Sam giving them factual information even though she was close to them? So those were some questions that I was having, because I was like, well, maybe Sam is close to them, but not actually giving them all the information. So that's why she's staying and they're going. Yeah. And then I guess the Ty confessional was interesting because he's saying that, like Stripper was taking so many like notes and that felt over the top. But I feel like if I was there, I would be taking a lot of notes. One, because I feel like there's so many things to track. So whether I was the mole or not, I probably would, just so that I would feel like comfortable taking the quiz. So I don't necessarily think that is good or bad, but I think also it could be a situation where it's good to have that sort of info, because then you can kind of recognize patterns later down the line.
Yeah, it's because it was a pattern in season 1 for sure, and it's not always a guaranteed pattern, but it is something that like you have to consider. I think we had a confessional maybe last episode on episode 3 from Ben W saying like, I'm looking at people who are close with Mark and Ben C, just because early on it's a little bit of a luck game, so naturally you might go home if you're aligned with the mole in the luck portion of the game. So it is something to look at. And obviously we do hear directly from Sam that like, these are all my allies going out left and right. But also to Geneva's point, like Sam might not be the mole and Sam's just feeding them bad info, or she's not giving them the full thing. Or maybe Sam has wrong info that she's sharing truthfully and honestly, thinking that it's good info to her allies. So like it could be a combination of many things, and it's not necessarily an easy cause and effect, but all good things to consider. Let's hop into the first mission that I know this cast was dreading to see the light of day. It's Hear Evil, Speak No Evil. So players would pair up where one player would hear evil while the other would speak evil. The Hear Evil players are committed to silence to earn $5 for the pot if they can just stay silent for the entirety of the mission, regardless if they do well or not. If they can just stay silent, I'll just put $5 in the pot. Easy peasy. But in pairs, the Hear Evil player, so the silenced player, will listen to a mashup of 2 songs, and if they can identify the 2 artists in the mashup, it'll tell them what they need to get their partner to do. They're pretty extravagant tasks. And I think they have like 7 or 8 minutes to get it done in terms of listening to the mashup and getting their partner to do it. If they can get their partner to succeed and do the correct thing within the time limit, then they'll earn $10. But remember, they are still committed to silence for that bonus 5. If they want to keep it. So pretty simple. But let's hop straight into Kim and Matt, our first group. Kim's our Hear Evil player, so she's committed to silence, even though she will speak throughout the mission and break that silence. And then we got Matt, who's our Speak Evil player. We have Kim. She's listening to a great mashup of Coldplay and Bruno Mars. And she figures it out. Let me tell you, it's cut out of the edit because, you know, it can't be forever. She took a very long time. Like, I was getting very nervous. I'm like, girl, you've got like no time to like go get Matt to like, go do this. Like, you gotta get moving here. So she takes a long time, but she figures out the proper combination. So she knows the proper task is to have your partner take all the notebooks and put them on the X while continuously reciting the alphabet, but only saying every other letter. They figure everything else, but she can't find the X, which is more visible in the other runs just because how the camera's angled, but it's just straight up on the desk in front of her. It should be pretty visible. But I mean, obviously, you know, she tries her hardest to get, I mean, she gets everything, but they just don't know where the X is. And that's ultimately what fails the mission here because they can't find the X. Any thoughts on Kim and Matt's? I guess more specifically Kim here because she's kind of the big problem child.
Well, I feel like you gave us some interesting context because Kim took so long trying to figure out the songs that it wasn't like, it just didn't register that she was just trying to rush to finish the challenge, that she just didn't realize the X was there. But then, you know, Matt was just like, oh, like she's been doing orgs for, you know, like 50 something years. So she should be able to pay attention to detail. No. And I'm just like, honestly, I feel like sometimes like, you're just not really thinking, you're just trying to get things done and over with. So I could see how that could be missed. But again, like I wasn't sure until like later on in the sequence where I was like, oh, the X was right there. But then maybe she was focused on what she was listening to, you know, on the computer. So it just didn't register at all.
Yeah, that's like a really tough. I mean, that is the tough part about the game, right? Because I also had that written down before I had seen in a later matchup where the X was right in front. Like I can imagine if I was locked into trying to decipher this, that it would have been understandable to have overlooked the X. But another part of me, the context of knowing that it took her a while, I mean, those are two very recognizable songs in my opinion, and like very recognizable artists. So it wasn't, to me, I don't think that it would have been, you know, that required that much time. And so then it does become one of those things where like all these elements are adding up to be like, yeah, what do you think is going to happen? And if you know your task is to put, Matt said this too, I think in a confessional, which is like, if you know that the task is to put the books on an X, wouldn't you want to like make sure you know where the X is before you start trying to communicate to go put it on an X? Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I don't know in the moment, I don't know the theories as to why people are doing, like, is it intentional sabotage? It could be the mole. If it's not the mole, like, why? What are they not getting? If it is not intentional. So, like, I had no idea. But obviously from the confessional, she's like, I didn't know if it was Maroon 5 or Coldplay. And we'll get to Ben W. later on in this mission. But, like, he wasn't sure about one of the mashups, so he just ran and was like, do this, and if this doesn't work, then I'm just going to switch it out to the other one. So like, I think
a thing that we see in general too, just with songs nowadays, is like there's a lot of songs I'm familiar with, but I may not actually know what it's called or the artist, but then as I was going through this challenge, I recognized most of them, whether it was at least the artist or the song. But you know, sometimes it could be complex, but you never know. It could have been Kim was intentionally doing it and was like, oh, I missed this, whatever. But I could also see, the other perspective where it might have just been like, just a silly mistake that just happened in the moment. So
absolutely. Let's move to a better duo. Let's go to Sarah and Ethan. Sarah's our Hear Evil player. Ethan's our Speak Evil player. Sarah gets a lovely mashup of Dua Lipa and ABBA. Figures it out pretty quickly. I think those are two very iconic songs. Figures out the prompt is have your partner run laps around the pool while singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Ethan does one lap. It does say laps plural. So like they kind of stood around, and luckily they didn't fall for the trap of like, wait, did we not do it right? Like, do we not have the right mashup? So like luckily Sarah was just like, do it again, and that's what they needed, just one more lap to make it plural. But avoided a pitfall. I was nervous there because I stood there for a good 5-10 seconds. I'm like, oh shit, they're about to like completely revert course and think that they're wrong. But well done. I think not really much to talk about that one. I think they did well. We're gonna move on because there's not really much. Let's go to Nikki and Tay. This one was rough. So you don't really hear it outside because wind, but Nikki does speak outside. We do give them like a free period to like ask any questions when I read the instructions to her, but after that period, like you're back to committed to silence. Nikki does speak out there, so that's ultimately what costs her the $5. She's no longer committed to silence at that point. Versus Kim speaks back out at the table after her turn is done. But Nikki hears Drake and Taylor Swift. She accurately clocks that Taylor Swift is part of the mashup, but she thinks she's hearing Pharrell Williams. So Nikki is doing her damnedest to get Tay. I think she is trying to get Tay to do the YMCA of her name while whispering she's the mole 15 times, which is not the prompt, because she needed to be doing the YMCA of her name and counting from 1 to 100 and back down to 1. But when you have the wrong artist, nothing more you can do because you're not going to get the right prompt. So no money earned, and Nikki speaks. So absolutely no money in this one either. Any thoughts on this one?
I mean, maybe, not to jump too far ahead, but I guess when I was watching it, even it read to me very much as just like a legitimate misunderstanding. I feel like, I don't know. That was just my read of the situation. Yeah, I don't have much else to elaborate on.
Yeah, obviously Nikki's not the mole. Spoiler.
Right. Yeah.
Surprise. Yeah, it was funny. I mean, I don't have too much to say, but I think that's where it becomes difficult trying to like convey sometimes a task. And clearly, I wasn't sure if there would have been a task to say I am the mole, but that was a funny moment.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that is a note. This is more on a production side because again, the only people on site who knew who the mole was Foster and I. There were other people who knew who the mole were, but they just weren't on site this season. So a lot of production was looking at Tay whispering, I am the mole, and being like, is this a clue to the mole's identity? Obviously, this was not the correct prompt, so it definitely is not a clue that we built into the game, but it still could be something of interest that I know production really latched onto. But obviously I can say it wasn't the correct prompt. So like read into it if you want, don't read into it. It wasn't meant to enter the game. It wasn't meant to enter the game. And you keep the wrong prompt.
And yeah, that's where it's like it's tough. But like I will say, just since we're on the topic of Tay and potential mole, I feel like as I was thinking, like for me, Tay wouldn't necessarily. Tay's one of the people on the cast that I feel like I'm more familiar with. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't be someone that I would necessarily like choose first to be the mole, but I do think that she would be someone that would be really, really fun to watch try to be the mole. And I do think that she possesses the capacity where like potentially nervousness could read as being be very player behavior. And so for that reason, like I do think that I could see the world in which whoever the mole selectors could say, maybe she's not the most natural fit, but maybe that is exactly the reason why we want her to be in this role. So I don't know. Yeah.
No, it's the thing is like there's so many reasons someone can and can't be the mole just from a personality perspective. It makes it so it makes it very hard to know. Because it's fun watching players suspect, or even viewers suspect people that like the mole team never considered, and like hearing the reasons why they would make a great mole that we never even like it didn't cross our minds as like that would be a good reason. So like, it's just fun to hear, and we're gathering more intel for every season we pick from the future on, being like, all right, now we're like adding to our ideas list of like things to consider moving forward. So it's always fun to hear everyone's perspective on why someone would or would not make a good mole. But let's get to the team. Sam hates me for this mission, and I'm sorry. Nathan is her partner. He's the hear evil. Sam's the speak evil. Nathan hears my favorite mashup of Rihanna and Guns N' Roses. He figures it out pretty quickly, and thank God someone has a sense of fucking urgency around here, because like Kim, Sarah, and Nikki are strolling into the house like there's no time limit to help their partner figure it out. At least he's a slight jog. Like, thank fucking God. But he has to get his partner to dance the Macarena while imitating sounds of 7 different animals. I know Sam is mortified of this clip, and it will live on in infamy. I will say I'm shocked that she doesn't know the moves of the Macarena. And she's not the one who solved it. The other people who could speak were able to help in the charade if they wanted. And I think that them solving the answer was more so credit to the people sitting, not named Sam, more so than it was Sam figuring it out. But hey, $10 is $10, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. But not a great effort from Sam Lechner.
Yeah, Sam is like really interesting to me as a character on this, and like I don't really know what to make of her positioning in the game just yet, but she seems to fit that category that people were saying where like, oh, someone who could just kind of sit back and like let the chaos unfold, understanding that people will try to be mole decoys and as a result will be sabotaging the challenges. So like, I don't know. That was really interesting to me. And I also felt that like the Speak Evil team did have more, like it's much harder to sabotage if you're on the Speak Evil team because of the fact that you have the help from other people. And so like to have, I don't know, to struggle to that extent was a little interesting. Like that was another thing for me that I was curious about would be in the challenge if people were successful but seemed to like be really hesitant to try different iterations of things in an attempt to like waste time basically.
Yeah, I kind of felt similarly in terms of trying to figure out kind of where, Sam is in the game. But obviously, I feel like Sam is one of the few people who I feel like are really bringing the entertainment in the confessionals. And it's always interesting to hear what her thoughts are throughout. But yeah, I think I was kind of because I felt like I didn't even know where that whole situation was going, but then eventually when it came into fruition and then Sam did what she did, then I was like, okay, this makes a lot more sense. Because of course I was also trying to decipher what these tasks were in the moment, seeing am I even figuring this out right? Would I ever even be able to gauge this based off of what people are even doing? And for some of them, I'm like, I don't know realistically if I would have picked up on this is exactly what the person is telling me to do. So yeah, it's been pretty interesting.
No, it's very hard because there's a lot of this like meta game that also is in the game of like what role would the mole choose, and like I think Gavin just said in his opinion he thought it was a little easier to maybe sabotage on the like being silent and having to charade out the task, which I would agree. But now the question becomes, is the mole going to take that role, which is the easier role to sabotage, or to throw people off because people are going to assume the mole's in that role? You pick the other role. So a ton of this metagame also, some of these prompts are easier or harder. The mole knew all the prompts. The mole knew which prompts were easier, which ones were harder. Do they put themselves in the easy prompts? Look like, I'm a town hero, look at me adding money to the pot. Or do they pick a harder prompt and can blame the failure on it? Well, it was just a hard prompt. They knew all the mashups. They knew everything. So this like metagame is really, you don't see it on camera because that's not fun to talk about. But like it is a big talking point of like where would the mole actually position themselves. So y'all really have highlighted a good chunk of this. I want to talk about my favorite group, which is Ben W and Madeline. Ben W is the Hear Evil, Madeline's the Speak Evil. I don't know Ben W's music tastes. Clearly has never heard Chaperone or Paramore for that matter. That's the mashup he gets. He initially thinks it is Paramore. He does have Paramore correct, but he thinks Chaperone is actually Olivia Rodrigo. Hence why Madeline is saying the colors of the rainbow in alphabetical order, which that was done well. I thought that was really smart to bring the props in to like show the different colors. I thought that was a really great idea. But unfortunately doing jumping jacks instead of head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And I will give him credit again. He realized, hey, you did the prompt. We didn't that's not right. So I must have done something wrong. But instead of swapping Olivia Rodrigo back to Chappell Roan, he ends up changing Paramore out for Avril Lavigne. So now Madeline's doing something completely wrong. Now she's doing jumping jacks and reciting she sells. There goes my gay list coming out. It's a mess. It's an absolute disaster from start to finish because nothing was right. No money earned, but I had a good time watching because I was in the moment trying to figure out like who does he think he's listening to, because like this prompt isn't right. It's really funny now looking back. I'm like, sir, Avril Lavigne and Olivia Rodrigo, no ma'am. That's so shitty. Any thoughts on this one? Because I think there's some good sprinkled with some bad.
Yeah, I mean, it happened. I mean, I guess I felt for at least I appreciate that Ben acknowledged that he felt really bad that he gave her the wrong task to do, and that she probably felt weird about it. But I guess it's like if you don't get the right songs, obviously you're gonna get some weird stuff. And that's why this whole time I was like, I wish I had this whole list in front of me of what the tasks were, because I'm kind of intrigued to see what they're going up to see or what the other possibilities were, or if we heard all of them theoretically. But I think that was the only thing that I was really curious about.
No, I think there were 30 I think there were 60 total options.
Whoa.
Oh wow. See, it's like, who knows?
There were a ton of options. So only so many, because there was a good mix of male and female artists, maybe some non-binaries in there. I don't know everyone's gender identity, okay? But like, if you hear what sounds to be a female voice, you at least can rule out, all right, Guns N' Roses ain't singing that.
Right.
So at least you can knock someone's off the list and move forward. But yeah, not terrible guesses from Ben, but also I did try to pick what I thought were iconic songs in Misery Business and Hot to Go. Unfortunately, maybe not. So no money on that one. And we move to our last team, Carson and Ty. Carson's our Hear Evil, Ty's our Speak Evil. Carson immediately recognizes it's Dolly Parton and Billie Eilish, and he has to have your partner juggle beanbags while singing one of the songs heard in the mashup. So either Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish or Jolene by Dolly Parton. I think Jolene is the much more famous song of the two, and probably the one the lyrics to on just a general basis. And again, this is another one where I think, much like Sam, the credit to solving it isn't really on Ty, but more so with the other players. Because I think they deduced it was Dolly Parton. And when Ty started singing 9 to 5 and that didn't work, they were like, maybe you should sing Jolene, which was the correct song to sing there. So money earned, but again, I don't necessarily credit that to Ty. I credit to some other players sitting around.
Teamwork, collaboration.
Yeah. That's part of the missions. It is teamwork. But overall, I had a good time watching. This was just a silly, fun mission, but they win 50 out of 90 possible dollars because they only get 3 of 6 prompts, and then Nikki and Kim broke their silence. So $40 out of the pot because of all of those things. But I think overall, a strong mission comparatively to the next one we're about to get to, because this one was a disaster. But any last thoughts on Speak Evil or whatever I called this? Anything you want to highlight that we haven't whatever so far?
No, not that I can think of.
Not really.
Perfect. Because let's get
fun to watch. Fun to watch.
It was fun to watch.
Let's get to the creme de la creme. I think this will probably go down as one of the most disastrous missions I have had to lay my eyes on. And this pissed people off. Like, this, I think, divided the group more than ever, which, slay. Fabulous. I love breaking apart the group and making people distrust people. Love it. Didn't think it'd be this mission, but here we are. So this is What Are You Asking? Worth $200. Oh, my Lord. So this game is played in 3 rounds where in each round, the players are at a different station or in a different role to help earn money. So the servers are read a trivia question with 6 possible answer choices, and their goal is to transport the water in the champagne flutes and pour the water into the bucket they believe corresponds to the correct answer choice. The Wheel of Fortune players are they get 1 Wheel of Fortune puzzle that they can solve, and if they get it, they move some of the champagne flutes further along the walking course, just so it's, because you're timed, now you have to transport less flutes for a smaller amount of distance. So that's helpful to So y'all can focus on figuring out what the right answer is. And then you've got maze players who are solving mazes that will tell them which buckets are 1000% incorrect answer choices, so they can remove those buckets from play, allowing more water to go into potentially correct answer choices. So everyone's kind of working together as one big team in 3 different roles. But they have 3 rounds to accumulate as much water in the correct buckets that they can, and earning 50 cents for every 5 ounces of water. I think each round they had almost 700 ounces of water in each round at their disposal. So like on paper, it doesn't sound like a nice conversion, but when you've got like 700 ounces of water, so you have 2,100 ounces of water across 3 rounds. It's a pretty hefty amount of money that gets squandered very quickly. Let's hop into round 1 because I think this is the juicy round. We have our Wheel of Fortune team. So Nikki, Ethan, Nathan, and Sarah. So here's the after show tea that you don't get to see in the episode. Each person was, you can kind of hear it, but it's not really a big talking point. It's really just quizability stuff. But like each person represented a different amount of flutes. So if people felt better about Wheel of Fortune puzzles, they could play for more flutes to move those along. So Niki's worth 10, Ethan's worth 20, Nathan's worth 30, Sarah's worth 40. So now you can kind of maybe play the whole meta game of like, is the mole choosing a high amount of flutes or a lower amount of flutes? You can play that game at home. But all of them failed to solve any of their Wheel of Fortune puzzles. So no yummy recipe, no aviator jacket, no hourly update, no muggy night. So all the champagne flutes start at the very beginning. None of them get moved up to the better location. And then we have our servers, Madeline, Matt, Ben W, and Tay, who have to move the flutes and pour their answer into which casino they believe is the oldest on the strip. And then you have our mazers, Carson, Kim, Sam, and Tay, who are solving the mazes to remove incorrect answer choices. I guess we'll start off. Did y'all know that the Flamingo is the oldest casino on the strip, or would you have had a guess? Because this team initially thought it was Circus Circus, which obviously fate must have had a fun little game to play, because that ends up being the only answer choice left on the table at the end. But they came in already thinking it was Circus Circus. I don't know if any of y'all have been to Vegas. Any thoughts on that before we get into what Carson does?
I've been to Vegas once for a wedding, and that was like 3 years ago, but I can't tell you that I know my Vegas trivia. So I don't actually know what I would have guessed, but you know, I don't know if I would have guessed Circus Circus specifically, but I don't know what I would have guessed.
Yeah. Valid.
Yeah, same. I don't know. I feel like all Vegas casinos, I feel like in my mind just have always existed there. So like I would have had a hard time guessing.
No, and that's completely valid. And what I love about this mission is we'll see an evolution in how the servers tackle the mission in each subsequent round. But this server group is like balls to the wall. We're just gonna start moving as much water as we can and start pouring in the answer choices we believe are correct, no matter how many buckets are still on the table. They're not willing to wait. So they're pouring a lot into Circus Circus because they just have convinced themselves that really Matt suggested it. And they kind of were like, we're going to put a majority there, but we'll spread our answers, you know, just to play it safe. The mazers, so there's 5 mazes to remove 5 incorrect buckets. They were really gung-ho. They really wanted to remove as many incorrect choices as they can, because the quicker you remove the choices, that means more water can go into potentially correct answer choices. But the problem is that there's a mole at hand, and they're not double-checking each other's work. Ultimately, Carson is confident that he'd like to remove bucket number 1 because he feels like he solved his maze and bucket number 1 is an incorrect answer. He removes that bucket, and ultimately that ends up being the correct answer. So they were told, if you remove a bucket from the table, that will null and void that answer choice completely. So it would basically, you earn no money, guaranteed, because I will only assess water that's left on the table. So the mazers don't do a great job because they're not double checking each other. They, you know, maybe you should be a little bit more confident before you're taking away an answer choice. And ultimately, it leads to $0 being won 33% of the way in because they removed the wrong answer. But again, it's hysterical that they don't remove Circus Circus somehow, which had they done that maze correctly, it would have removed Circus Circus. But like that was the answer the team was already convinced of. So just, it was all very coincidental that all those things happened together. But like, do you think the mole would be someone like Carson who would do something like this? Or do you think the mole, if in that group, would be like, Carson wants to remove number one? He could let him do it, because I know that's the right answer. Let's encourage him and let him do that. You can take the blame, but I know that you just removed the correct answer choice. Kind of like, where do you, or is the mole not even on that team? Where are your thoughts around all of this?
Could be in so many different directions. Yes. So like the thing is, I feel like right now Carson is doing a lot.
Yes.
That like, you know, I guess you would think it's suspicious to the point where it could be mole behavior, right? And I think a lot of people did not seem very happy with Carson. And when he was trying to explain like, oh, you know, like, oh, and then he was saying only, you know, 6 was left and all this sort of stuff. They were, I don't know, it just looked like there's a lot of confusion and everything. So I think like, you know, I think when you're there and you see someone like blatantly sabotaging, you're going to look at them, but then also you might be thinking, maybe they're doing this just so I put some votes on them, you know, like on the quiz, you know, because that's also part of the game too, is you want people to be suspicious of you to an extent. I mean, obviously you don't want it to the point where maybe people don't trust you and they don't give you any information, right? Yeah. But I think that it's a situation where you're kind of like, is Carson the mole, right? But I feel like it's possible that the mole could have been in that group, and maybe the mole was planning to sabotage, but didn't need to because Carson did. And that could also be a sort of situation that happened. Or like you said, mole could completely not be in that group entirely, but you know, in a sense, it helps the mole keep suspicion off of them. So it's a win for them. But you know, I don't know. I think generally I'm looking more for subtle sabotage rather than like outright sabotage. But I still think obviously it's not something we should be discounting. I think we should be looking at Carson, but I'm still feeling a little like, I don't know. This seems too obvious. But sometimes I feel like moles do obvious things. So I think it just depends on what you're looking for and what you find could be suspicious. But I think for some people, like I've heard a decent amount of people say they are suspicious of Carson. But I also feel like, you know, if they're suspicious, then maybe Carson doesn't need to be doing that stuff. But also, I don't know, maybe Carson just really did the puzzle really is bad. So then that just happened. But I'm suspect, obviously. I would be suspect. So
I'd be pissed, honestly. Like I would be so mad. Like I feel like from what it sounds like, that there are some people who kind of see Carson as someone who has been in one way or another, whether intentionally or not, sabotaging these missions, and so costing the players money added to the pot. And I think personally, I agree with Geneva. Like, I don't think that the mole is going to necessarily outright be this upfront and aggressive, but I mean, all it takes as a mole decoy is just one, or really all it takes is one person to believe that the mole could be someone who would assume this more forefront position, and that could squeeze enough points off of a correct mole suspect and onto someone who you know yourself, knowing that you're safe. So I think it's a smart move. But again, like my brain doesn't work like that, and I wouldn't be that person. It would just piss me off knowing that like we're just wasting money like for that reason. But yeah, he's someone that you can't write off at the same time, which would also be annoying.
That's the thing. Y'all have talked about so many brilliant topics. I don't even know like where to even like start. Like, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You've got y'all who are both like, I'm looking for a mole that's more subtle. I think we talked about it. Did we talk about the last after show? I don't remember. No, I didn't. I talked about it in an interview I just conducted yesterday, is that the mole is going to be listening to what people are looking for and doing the opposite. So like if the mole is hearing that this cast in particular is looking for a subtle mole, the mole's probably going to start doing some really brash shit, being like, oh, well, they're looking for a subtle mole, so I'm going to do the opposite of what they're looking for. So they write me off. So like, obviously you don't know what the cast is looking for. If they think the mole would be someone who's going to do something super over and super in your face, or if they're looking for a more subtle and covert mole. So like, yeah, is Carson the mole doing exactly opposite of what this cast expects, or is Carson playing the mole decoy role? Because regardless, he has sus on him. He's got people looking at him. I think Matt talks about it in the quiz portion. He's like, I'm not 100% thinking Carson's the mole, but so many others have him as a potential that like I would be stupid to not answer questions for him. Because if it is him, I'm toast. And I'm going to be the lowest score. So like he's even drawing people like Matt to have to answer questions on him, which like if he's a mole decoy, brilliant. If he's a mole, maybe not as brilliant, but like again, you have to the mole. If Carson's the mole, he's taking a risk. He's playing the reverse psychology game. Like, fine, call my bluff. Think I'm being a mole, being this outwardly anti-pot. Call my bluff. See if you'll do it. So like, it's because he has a huge effect on this mission. Carson becomes not very liked in the game because his actions in round one drastically affects how people play the mission moving forward. A little bit to their detriment. So let's hop into round two. So now we have Wheel of Fortune players, Madeline, Tay, Ben W, and Matt. So our servers have now transitioned to Wheel of Fortune. Madeline worth 10 flutes, Tay worth 20, and Ben W worth 30. All do not solve their Wheel of Fortune puzzles. So no I Jump for Joy, no Just Showing Off, no Woven Together. But Matt, worth 40 flutes, does solve his of Happy Trail. So 40 flutes do get moved to the middle location. So less room to walk. So that's a good starting ground for our servers, who are now Carson, Kim, Sam, and Tay. So our mazers are now our servers. And they have to figure out what is the meaning of the word Las Vegas in Spanish. And then we have our mazers, who were our Wheel of Fortune people last time. So Nikki, Ethan, Nathan, and Sarah are our maze solvers. Unfortunately, because of Carson and them not double checking, I think they course corrected really hard, where they are like, we are not removing anything unless something is triple, quadruple checked. Answers are not being removed very fast at all. At all. So that is leaving much more time for our servers to have to spread their water out across 5-6 answer choices because the mazers are refusing to take answers away out of fear of what happened with Carson. So like he has now affected round two, which is unfortunate because Carson suggests that the answer is the Oasis, which is wrong. And then they also are like, all right, if it's not the Oasis, it's probably the Baron. We're going to split our water probably between mostly those two. Both of these are wrong. And because the mazers aren't removing those answers, almost all their water is pretty much put into those buckets, which leads to my favorite moment of the entire episode when Ethan comes in. He's like, I hope no one's filling up bucket number 2. And I'm sitting there being like, almost all of their water is in bucket number 2. And Sam has a cow. Sam's like, Ethan, I swear to God, if do not fuck with me right now. Like, and Ethan's like, I swear to you, number 2 is wrong. Like, we need to get rid of it. So there goes pretty much most of the water from this round as well out the wazoo because confirmation bias up front and the mazer's taking a really long time. So like I'm looking at Sarah, Nathan, Ethan, and Nikki, like what's going on? You know, you got to find a happy medium, and maybe this was not a happy medium in the maze section. Where do you, anything else you notice? What are your thoughts on this round? Because we have a completely different round from round 1.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that like even after all the stuff that happened with Carson, that people still kind of trusted him again. And then in the end, they realized he was wrong. And then they're like, wait, why did we even follow this? And I'm like, maybe from the first time you shouldn't. And that's where I'm just like, this feels too much mole decoy in the sense that I'm like, but is it like, you know, like being too obvious, you know, where he is the mole and he's just like, okay, I'm just showing y'all I'm the mole. But it just feels like he's doing a lot in this small period of time in this challenge, which is why I'm like hesitant to think that way. But yeah, I think it was just very interesting to see kind of how, you know, people were, how they were operating this time around. And I think I was hopeful that at least from the first round that we would maybe feel like, okay, we kind of have a new strategy this time. But then it seemed like that there was a lot of confusing. It was just funny to seeing you in the background, just like, you know, I'm just vibing watching all of this unfold and everything. So
Yeah, in that second round, it was really funny because I think that Tay came out at one point during the episode, and then CLC, you were like, "Are you here to remove another answer?" And she said, "No," and
No.
then you're like, "Oh, okay." I was like,
That's like, what are you doing out here then? Like,
yeah, exactly. I thought it was fun. And I think maybe that was that second round. I forgot. Maybe it was the first round too. But at one point, Sarah said that she noticed that like Nathan, like she thought that Nathan like intentionally maybe like tipped over one of his flutes
great,
to like
yeah.
spill
I
it
think
along
so.
the way.
Third, I think.
That is to me more compelling of potential evidence towards a mole, especially in a challenge that has so many, or sorry, mentioned that has so many moving parts already that you can kind of start to maybe get away with some of those smaller, more subtle things. It's just slightly less money that's being added.
Yeah, no, I mean, Nathan's a bad pour. Ty was a super bad pourer.
Which is funny because he's a bartender.
He's a bartender. He has like 6 champagne flutes in his hand. He's like, I'm like, sir, put them down on the ground or put them down on the table and pour them one by one. Like, you're losing water.
Well, he's off the clock, so anything goes basically.
Yeah.
I promise there's no alcohol in the house until the game's over. So he wasn't drunk mid-mission, but yeah, watching that back, I was like, Ty, what are we doing? What are we doing with this pour?
And that's the thing. I think maybe he just wasn't taking it as like as seriously as work because it was water, right? So it's like it's not like I have to keep this balance these glasses. I don't have to worry about them breaking, causing any problems. So it's that sort of situation.
I will say, I will give the servers a little bit of credit, not much. I think once the Baron and the Oasis got removed, which is kind of where they put most of their water, they at least finally did something smart, and that was we're gonna stop pouring because clearly anything we think is right is wrong. We're gonna let the Mazers kind of catch up, remove some more options, so then we can at least guess between 2 options rather than 4. So I will give them their credit there. They like stood in place for like we're just gonna wait because the Mazers taking a long ass time, and eventually. They got down to 2 answers. One of them was right. So they do bank a little bit of water, not a lot, but they do bank a little bit of water. So I'll give round 2 a little bit of credit.
Yeah, that was great strategy. I did actually like
Very
that they
smart.
didn't bother because I was just like, I feel like, in the first round, it's just like, okay, people are just doing whatever, right? And it's like, no, actually, you know what? Let's wait to see if the maze people can come back and say, no, this is obviously not it. So then they wouldn't have wasted all that water. So I thought that was actually a really smart strategy.
Super smart because that becomes the round 3 strategy, which again, it's what I think what I'm really impressed with this cast is they're finding ways to kind of not like skirt the rules, but like it's very taskmaster in how they're thinking about the prompt. Like, okay, how can we push strategically? How can we push the limits here? And I thought it was really smart. Like, let's just hoard our water until we have less answer choices and like make use better of the water. But that's round 3. So our Wheel of Fortune people, Kim, Carson, Sam, and Ty, once again, Kim worth 10, Carson worth 20, Sam worth 30. None of them get their answer right, despite, I think, Sam having one of the only puzzles where like the other players knew the answer is one of the few times where the other players are like, come on now. The answer is flavorful appetizer. Like, come on now. Let's not be crazy. But Ty does get his correct. He does get Chewy Taffy correct and does pick up on the fact that most of these puzzles did have some wonky letters in there. So, like, good on him. So, again, 40 flutes get moved forward because of Ty. Our servers this time around are Nikki, Ethan, Nathan, and Sarah, who have to pour their water in the location of the largest Ferris wheel in the world. And then our mazers are Madeline, Tay, Matt, and Ben W. Our servers take the approach of we're just going to move all the flutes to the middle table, a little closer to the end, and we're just going to wait. We're going to wait. We're not going to do anything crazy. We're going to wait for some answers to get removed. The mazers, on the other hand, we got some issues. We got some issues here with the mazers. One, I love that Ben W is just doing this all in his head and not using a pen. I really love that. That really tickled me because I'm not over there. So this is the first time I'm seeing any of this. So that really tickled me. I'm like, sir, what are we doing? Like, come on now. Like, why are you doing that in your head? Also, it sounds like Ben W was being like, oh, this maze answer is bucket 1. And everyone's like, I just double checked that. That's not bucket number 1. So already you're having to triple, quadruple check some of these because you have 2 different people saying the answer is this. Or you're having to waste more time, double, triple confirming things. But the thing I really want to talk about is Madeline. So there's some miscommunication going on with the mazers. They're trying to kind of meet in the middle, being like, all right, we got to be faster than how round 2 went, but a little slower than round 1 in terms of taking some answers away. It sounds like they told Madeline to remove bucket number 2. which was Singapore. I guess Madeline did not remove it. Again, I'm not there, was not there, so I can only communicate what I see in the edit and what I see in the video. So I don't know anything extra. But bucket number 2 is Singapore, which a lot of the water gets poured into because they removed 2 other answer choices. Singapore's still on the board, and that's when the team goes, all right, we have 4 answer choices. Let's start moving. Let's start pouring water. And bucket 2, Singapore, was the answer that they were eyeing to begin the mission. They're like, Singapore just sounds right. So Singapore is getting a lot of water, and Madeline's being like, all right, do we have another one we can remove? And Tay's like, number 2. And she goes, oh, I haven't removed that. And Ben's like, we already asked you to remove number 2. So that kind of delay allowed a lot of water to get poured into Singapore, which is unfortunate because when Madeline comes to remove it, they're like, we already have so much in there. Like, are you positive that's right? Because like we don't want to lose out on this water if we are right that it is Singapore. And she's like, I promise you, like, it's been double, triple checked. I'm removing it. So once again, the mazes are the problem child, kind of like the source of all problem here are the mazes. Eventually they do get down to 2 answer choices, Russia and UAE, which up to that point had pretty much no water in them. So once again, just I think piss poor management of the water, also kind of confirmation bias as to what answer was correct, kind of led to not a lot of water being banked. The mazers do figure out that number 4, Russia, is wrong, but they don't remove it because there is some water in it and they just would rather play it safe. But ultimately, UAE is right. They do get a good chunk of water, and they end up with banking about $19 out of a total of $200.
Yes.
That's wow.
Let's talk anything about this mission because my God.
Well, yeah, I feel like Madeline was very suspicious, knowing that they were saying, oh, 2, and then she goes and she doesn't do 2, and then she's like, okay, I'm going to do 2. And then obviously that caused confusion with the people outside. And then I think, what was it? Like she was removing 5, I think. And then you said, no, this is 6.
That's 6, love.
This is 6, love. I was like, so that's why I was also like, is that like a slight something? Even though obviously that was more with you, but I'm still like, whoever was around probably would have noticed moving the wrong bucket. Like that could be something that is a little suspicious. But yeah, I think that there was that sort of, I think you gotta get to the point though, I feel like with some of these challenges with the trivia, it's like you kind of want to stick with something. So I feel like people just felt confident in this like particular choice. So they're like, okay, well, we're gonna keep going with this until this bucket is removed. But then even when we're kind of at the point where it's like time to remove the bucket, it's like, are you sure? Like, are you really sure?
Are you positive? You really, really sure? Yeah, those were the best moments. Like, are you positive? I'm like, well, you were waiting for them to remove buckets, and now you're challenging them for removing buckets. Like, which is it? Like, it just was a mess. Yeah, like I'm all pro not interfering in sabotage, just with that mission, with the buckets and how much water and the champagne flutes being everywhere. I was like, let me make sure she knows that that's bucket 6. Just because there was so much happening. If it was a little bit more clear in the moment, I would have let her remove bucket 6 and be like, that's on you. Obviously, it wasn't the right answer anyway, so it didn't have any real major effect on anything. But that's why I stepped in. So I was just like, it's a clusterfuck up here at this table. I don't want anyone to feel like production should have stepped in to be like, hey, that wasn't clear. But usually I'm like, let them sabotage. If it's clear in my mind, that's on y'all if y'all can't read.
Yeah, and then one other thing about Madeline, there's that kind of like the discussion of like Ben feels suspicious of Madeline because I guess Madeline was going around getting people suspicious of Ben. So I'm just like, what is going on there? Is one of them a mole and they're deciding that they're gonna put suspicion on the other person? So that stood out to me. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you've played live, Gavin. Any thoughts on kind of why someone would go around telling everyone she's suspicious of someone for something that they authentically did?
I mean, I think there's the obvious, the obvious answer is that ultimately you want people to be wrong, and every one, even just one question answered in an incorrect direction could be enough and be the difference between you staying versus leaving. But I think there's also the broader picture too of like, you also want to be like, I feel like for me, when it was in person, it was so much harder not to trust people. But then I had to remind myself that, especially with the people that I didn't trust as much, that like there is definitely incentive, even if you're not the mole, to give incorrect information. And so I think that there's sort of almost a game there of like trying to potentially sow seeds of distrust between the rest of the cast there too. Whether that's two ways or just in one direction. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of different reasons. And then of course there's the simple answer, which is maybe they didn't even necessarily know that what they were saying was, incorrect or whatever. So yeah, lots of directions, as with the mole, that you could interpret these things.
You never know why people are saying anything, why they're saying anything, what's truthful, what's not truthful, what people believe, or people just saying shit to say shit. It's a mess, but
It is
a pretty crap mission for the group pop. I think they're above, I think $300, $350, $750. So hey, that's not too bad. We're almost halfway through the season, and they're creeping up about the halfway mark to where y'all were in season 1. So we're not doing terrible. We get to the quiz portion. Is there anything in the voiceover that like stuck with you? Is there anything that someone said that was like, ooh, I like that, or that's echoing how I'm feeling in the moment? Was there anything that was said that you really want to harp on before we have to say goodbye to Nikki?
Not that I can really think. Nothing that stood. Nothing that I wrote down, at least.
Yeah, I think one thing, I think Tay mentioned it. Tay was talking about Kim and just like how, I guess she's noticing like Kim's behavior when it comes to like, playing up being a mother, potentially maybe consistently fumbling things. So I think, because I feel like some people have just kind of been like, oh, I don't really think it's Kim at all. But then there are others that are like, is Kim playing an act? So, or like, is there something that Kim is doing that's more to this? And then, I think just hearing people's different general suspicions of certain people, I started noticing that like some of the names that we were hearing were like people who maybe did something slightly either in a challenge, like in these missions and things like that, that were standing out to me more. So I feel like people are starting to really pick up on what people are doing. And I feel like that's starting to influence, the people potentially who they're supposedly picking in their quizzes. But again, like we kind of talked about before, they could be saying a person and not actually putting them on the quiz. So absolutely. You never know. And I think sometimes too, like it may be a situation where, I don't know, maybe they don't actually want, maybe they don't want production to actually know who they're really thinking. So they're just saying something, who knows? So that could also be something, but I think it is interesting to kind of just hear some people's different reasoning. And I've been starting to think more like, well, yeah, Kim missed the X, or, or like just even like little small things. Like when I just noticed like sometimes like Sarah's like facial expressions, whether it just seems very muted. So I'm just like, is it like she's just not trying to show anything? Like there's certain things that you start to pick up on, I think also just from how things are going.
Yeah, we're reaching that point where I always say the first like 2-3 boots are always a little luck, a little random. Sometimes your suspects have things in common with them all. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're on teams with them all and you don't select that option on the quiz because you don't want to select yourself. There's a little bit of random stuff that kind of happens in the first couple rounds. In this round, this is when it starts to become, are you on the right track? Are you not on the right track? And then if you're on the wrong track, you might just be staying because your mole has a lot in common with the actual mole. But this is where we start to send people home because they're just wrong. And this is where we're getting at, but this is where you have to start assessing resumes of people, because there are people who play this game and don't really get the concept of suspicion gets put on you because that has to be earned. You have to have a resume that looks like a mole for people to suspect you. You can't just magically get suspicion on yourself by doing nothing. Again, I'm not saying you have to intentionally sabotage anything, but like things have to go awry when you're around for people to be suspicious of you. That's just naturally what has to happen. Either people who are close to you go home, missions don't go well when you're involved. You have to start having a resume. And I think that's what we're starting to see in these confessionals, like not only what happened in this round, but things that happened in the past. And like this cast is a very suspicious cast. Like I have a resume for every single one of them as to like why they could be the mole. And I think that's why we see a bunch of different answers and everyone's all over the map, because that's the truth. Because everyone is all over the map. No one's confident at all at who the mole is. But now I want to know, who do you think the mole is? Because now I want, who's your mole pick and like who might win the season? I don't know. Who might win it?
Hmm.
You can give a couple, but you're gonna have to lock in one answer though.
Well, I was like kind of trying to think about this, and maybe this is a bad way to think about this, but I looked at I approached it first from a meta perspective because I'm just trying to pare my options down here a little bit. So I looked at where last season's mole Matt was in several things. So I took a look at the cast graphic where he was stood in the cast graphic. I looked at where he was in what order he was in the cast reveal. And then I looked at where he is in the cast sequence. Again, this probably has no bearing. It's probably just random. I have no idea. But I'm just trying to make myself feel like I'm making a reasoned choice, which would eliminate Kim, who is in the second row from the left. And I do think I played one of the last traders thing with Kim, and I was really suspicious of her because like her demeanor is very even keeled, and like I just felt like she's someone who would be able to moderate that, but then to learn that she was ultimately not a traitor, I feel like that now I'm like, maybe it's a similar sense. Nikki was also in the same place in the cast reveal, but we know that she's not them all. And then Ty is also in there for being eighth in the sort of intro sort of sequence at the beginning of every episode as the same spot as Matt. So all that to say, I think that if I had to choose like two suspects right now, I would probably say that I'm between like Nathan and Sam. Yeah.
Any reason why outside of the meta?
I mean, yeah, so I think that with Nathan, the fact that he was sort of caught in a more subtle act of sabotage during this mission, I think was interesting. I also noticed that Nathan had a confessional during the first mission of this episode where he was like, I think it was him who was like, "Oh, I like this. Like, I like the mashup, so I'm just going to sit back and enjoy it for a little bit, and then I'll get the rest of this mission done," type of a thing. And so, like, again, subtle sabotage of just kind of like spending additional time that you don't necessarily need to, that could be spent potentially trying to get this the task done. And then for Sam, for reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of this, where I felt like sort of almost like deflecting blame off of her allies going out to the mall, when in reality she could potentially be feeding bad information or not giving complete information. Yeah.
All right, Geneva, your turn.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I wouldn't say that I have like a person per se, but I guess a couple people who at least have come off, I feel like, more suspicious. I would say Madeline seems a little bit more suspicious. I wasn't looking at Madeline before, but just kind of seeing certain interactions like this episode and the previous episode, I think that I'm starting to think maybe like little things like that could potentially, I think cause some potential not necessarily concern, but I think just alert for people.
Yeah.
And kind of like we were talking about earlier, I feel like Nathan, that whole spilling the cup situation, it's a subtle thing, but it's not something that is so, like overt that it's like, okay, well, this is like too obvious. And then I guess like I don't necessarily have too concrete information about why per se. This is just more, I think, just like based on what I'm seeing and observing, just like maybe just like their demeanor or like how they've been, I guess, operating through the game. Sarah, and I feel like earlier she had said something along the lines like, oh, like her suspects were two people who were like first boots. So I don't know if that's more because like they were and she was off and she's pivoted since then, or if it's a situation of where it's like, those are who I thought, and that's who I'm coming up with right now because I'm actually, the mole. So I think those are some people that I am, thinking about more right now, but it's like, there are certain people who've done little things here and there, like Kim and, and like Ben and like, Carson's done a lot. So it's like those people, I'm just like, okay, maybe you never know. But
Never
they're
know.
not really giving it right now, but those are the three that I think seem to be the most, I feel like, I guess, based on things they've said or they've recently done.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I think you bring up a great point about Sarah. I think Sarah just has this natural, like, mysterious energy to her and has just kind of like demeanor of like, are you interested? Like, where are you at? Because you just have this same kind of like just facial structure and at every step of the way.
Because even just in executions, like she
Yeah.
doesn't usually have like a big
That's
reaction in
no.
comparison to other people. So
Like,
I've always found that was interesting. But there are other people who are like, you know, holding people's hands tight or crying and things like that, which personally is just not how I personally would. I think I would be very nervous. Honestly, even if I were the mole, I would still be nervous, even though I know like I wouldn't be, you know, executed. But I still feel like it would be a situation just because I think it's also like you may not know. I don't know if you guys told the mole who is going home.
Nope, they have no idea.
Okay, so like, you know, I think it's still a surprise. You know, there's that sort of element of surprise.
Absolutely.
Where that could be nerve-wracking. So
and there's so much stress to being the mole. So like that's what's something I look for on like the real show is like who just feels emotionally drained. Because like it's so much pressure. So like that's something I look for on the real show because they play for weeks on weeks on weeks versus we're just 4.5 days. So it's like, yeah, whatever, who cares?
Exactly.
But like that's something I look for. Yeah, it's very stressful, but I love all these thoughts. Now here you have a lot of pressure now because I think someone's mentioned it in the Discord. It's time for your winner pick. You have to only pick one, and do note there's a curse going around. Every after show, someone picks a winner who goes home the next episode. So just know one of you is about to curse someone right here and now. But who do you think could be winning the season? Or try to end the curse. Maybe y'all are the first ones to end the curse.
No pressure. Look, my explanation I feel like is actually pretty well reasoned. I kind of like came in prepared to answer the winner question. So I'm looking for someone who I think is performing well in missions, and I'm looking for someone who I think I could envision being in socially good enough with enough people that you would have enough information to perform well, and someone who just in my mind I feel like would have the intuition to be able to weed out good information, bad information, and the intuition to say like that is just objectively more suspicious than another thing. And for me right now, that person is Matt. Like I also saw Matt as someone who was like looking around during the executions, like really even the people sitting in front of him trying to like look around and see their reactions to when their name is first said, when their screen turns green, and who I think is also genuinely maybe a little bit nervous when he sees his name up on the screen too. So not in a curse sense, but I do have faith that I think Matt could very well be the winner of the season.
Yeah, hopefully I'm not cursing him because that's literally what I was thinking.
Oh no! Oh, it's over. It's over. It's over. It's over. Sorry.
No,
Matt.
it's just like I think just in general, like the missions, he seems to know everything that's going on. He's like, how do people not know how to spell? How do people not know how to do this particular thing? I feel like he's picking up on so much that like, but I don't know if it's like maybe he's laser focused too much that maybe it might lead to some issue. But I just feel like he just seems very like confident and aware of his surroundings. I feel like, I mean, I guess we shouldn't really be doing meta or edits. I mean, I don't know how much like that's been going into, but I just feel like oftentimes he's like kind of like this, I feel like telling the story or telling us, you know, like his thoughts, his perceptions. And I think of just like all the people I've seen on the cast, I feel like I've been getting more of like sort of, you know, I guess a sense of like where his head is at in some ways. And just like, I just feel like I'm not getting that as much from like other people. And then, but I also know, I guess I'll just say like other people maybe could, I'm not really sure. I mean, like, I know that for some people, like Sam is a mole suspect, but I've also heard like, you know, Sam has done really well in games and very intelligent. So I feel like if Sam is in the mole, I think Sam also has a pretty good shot at winning the game. So, I mean, we'll see. But yeah, no, I'm more really on Matt. So sorry, Matt, if that is the case. But I mean, the game already happened, so we're not actually really controlling what happened. So
well, Matt, now you know when you get executed in a few days that they cursed you 6 months in the future, and that's what impact. No, I'm just kidding. But I love all these thoughts. That's what, and please read into the edit. I mean, it's not the Edgic isn't necessarily applicable here because there's no like right way or like one way to play them all. Like we've seen, if you've watched the Netflix version, you've seen winners who are absolute shit sticks and like are terrors. Then you've got winners who are pro pot, nothing but pro pot, team player, team player, team player, and that's no different in any other version. You know, older American, or if you go international, like you have different winners, different archetypes, all those things. So, like it's hard to really suss out a winner edit per se, because it depends what kind of game they're playing, and it's just very different. So, but read into the edit. I love it, but that's what you heard. Matt is winning the season, or he's getting executed in 2 days. That's what you've heard from Geneva and Gavin. But anything else you want to say before we sign on out of here? Anything else that you want to get off your chest? This is the moment.
No, this was fun. I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Enjoyed talking about it. Can't wait to see what happens next. Look forward to seeing if we broke the curse. Hopeful that we did. So
you're open. I mean, I know if you broke the curse or not, but you'll see in a couple of days. But that's all the time we have for the after show. I've had an absolute blast. Episode 5 airs this Thursday, May 15th at 9 o'clock Eastern. And I'll be back next Tuesday at 9 o'clock Eastern to recap that week's episode. Subscribe to our YouTube page, join our Discord, engage in all the fun discussion. To send us off, we're going to show you the preview for next week's episode.
How many guesses do we have left for the 6-letter word?
We have 2 guesses left for 6-letter.
Start with 4 or 5.
I don't think it's going to be close.
Sure thing. Wait, is Greenland a country?
Yellow was 71. Blue was 82. Purple was 91.
Welcome, players, to your next execution of the season. Tie.
Maybe it'll end the stream. TBD.
How many guesses do we have left for the 6?
We're ending that.